This isn't the kind of place for people like you. You need to leave. That's what the hotel manager said. Not quietly, not politely, but with a dismissive flick of his hand like he was swatting away something that didn't belong. It was loud enough for two bellhops to stop mid-step, loud enough that the white couple behind her hesitated, and loud enough for Dr. Celeste Morgan to feel the sharpness of it cut through the elegant silence of the lobby like glass shattering on marble. No one moved. For a second. Even the music from the baby grand in the corner seemed to freeze. And as she stood there, still holding her confirmation email in one hand and her ID in the other, Celeste said nothing. She didn't have to. Not yet. Because in less than 24 hours, this man's name would be trending across social media, and not because he offered world-class hospitality. But before we get into what happened next, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And if stories like this stir something in you, tap like, hit subscribe, and stay with us. Now let me take you back to where this all started. It was a crisp Friday afternoon in Manhattan. The sun was dropping lower between the towers of Midtown, casting long gold shadows on the sidewalk. At exactly 3:57 that afternoon, a sleek black Lincoln town car pulled up to the curb in front of the Westbridge Grand Hotel, a five-star property known for its opulent suites, white-gloved service, and its rooftop ballroom where billionaires and celebrities often mingled behind velvet ropes. Out stepped Dr. Celeste Morgan. No entourage, no loud presence, just a graceful, composed woman in her early 40s, dressed in a beige cardigan over a pressed white blouse, black slacks, and a soft leather weekender bag slung over her shoulder. Her hair was pulled into a neat twist. She wore flats, not heels, no makeup, no jewelry, except for a simple gold wedding band. The doorman greeted her with a nod. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Welcome to the Westbridge." She smiled kindly. "Thank you." But she had only taken 10 steps into the marble-floored lobby when she heard a voice call out behind her. "Excuse me, miss, can I help you?" She turned around to see a tall, sharp-featured man in a navy suit approaching. His name tag read, Paul Kensington, Director of Guest Experience. His voice was friendly on the surface, but there was something just under it, tight, controlled, and measured. She nodded. "Yes, I'm checking in. Presidential suite, under Morgan." His eyes scanned her, slowly, from her shoes to her bag to her face. "Just to clarify," he said, "this entrance is for registered guests only. If you're here for a delivery or rideshare pickup, you'll need to use the service entrance on 49th. Celeste blinked. Once. "I'm not a driver. I'm your guest." She pulled up the confirmation email on her phone and passed him her ID. He took it, hesitated, then gave a strained smile. "Oh, I see. Well, just a moment." He motioned her toward the front desk but walked slightly ahead, like he still didn't trust what she said. Behind the desk, a young woman named Marina tapped gently on her keyboard. "Dr. Celeste Morgan," Celeste repeated. "Presidential suite, booked through the Education Gala Foundation." Marina gave a polite smile. "Yes, I see your reservation right here. Everything is." "Let me take over," Paul interrupted, leaning over the counter. "There may be a duplicate on the room. I'll check." Celeste stepped back, letting the man do his dance. She had learned, long ago, not to meet disrespect with anger. Not at first. That moment would come. Paul frowned at the monitor, then at her. "Strange. I don't see an authorization for a suite. Just a pending reservation. Might have been canceled." "That's not correct," Celeste said softly. "It was paid in full 2 weeks ago. The receipt is in the confirmation email I showed you." Marina glanced at her manager. Uneasy. Paul sighed, as if she were the inconvenience. "Well, We'll get it sorted. In the meantime, we can offer you a deluxe king on the 10th floor until we verify the suite status. That won't be necessary, Celeste said. I'll wait. She didn't raise her voice, didn't shift her posture, but the tone in her voice changed, from pleasant to professional. She had used that voice in courtrooms, board meetings, and Senate hearings. It was the voice of a woman who wasn't asking for what she'd earned. She was stating it. Paul hesitated, visibly flustered. Of course, he mumbled. Let me just check with housekeeping. He disappeared down the side hallway, and Celeste stood still, her back straight, eyes scanning the lobby. A white couple had just walked in, dressed in joggers and windbreakers, dragging a pair of scuffed duffel bags. They looked like they'd just come from a jog. The same Marina greeted them warmly and handed over their keys without a question. No ID check, no re-verifying payment, no delay. Celeste saw it all, every second, and said nothing. Because this wasn't her first time walking into a room that didn't expect her. But this time, the room was going to change. When Paul returned 15 minutes later, his expression had shifted. Tight lips, red around the ears. Looks like everything's been processed after all. Housekeeping just finished the suite. We'll have someone escort you up now. She nodded. Thank you. But before she took the key card, she leaned slightly closer and said something only he could hear. You made a decision about me before you even knew my name. I'll remember that. You should too. Then she turned, lifted her chin, and walked toward the elevators. While Paul stood there, hands at his sides, unsure if he'd just made a mistake he couldn't undo. The suite wasn't ready. That's what they told her when she reached the 30th floor. We've had a maintenance issue. Plumbing, I think. The bellman mumbled as he held the door of a much smaller room open. It was comfortable. Sure. A deluxe king. Decent view. But it wasn't what she paid for. And Celeste Morgan wasn't the type to let things slide quietly. She stood just inside the door, her weekender bag still slung over one shoulder, eyes calmly scanning the room. One bed instead of two. No fireplace, no office area, no skyline view. Definitely not the $4,800 presidential suite she had booked. Confirmed. And prepaid. This isn't the room, she said gently. Not accusatory, but firm. The young bellman, a college kid named Trevor. She'd caught his name on the elevator ride, fidgeted awkwardly. Yeah, I know. Mr. Kensington said the suite's unavailable. He told us to place you here for the night. They're gonna sort things out tomorrow. I think... Celeste narrowed her eyes. Plumbing? Yeah. He said a pipe broke or something. Trevor shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. Do you know if the suite's occupied? I don't know. Ma'am. Sorry. Celeste looked at him with empathy. This wasn't his fault. He was just following instructions. Thank you. Trevor. You've been kind. She waited for him to leave, then closed the door quietly and sat down on the edge of the unfamiliar bed. She didn't cry. She didn't curse. She opened her laptop, logged into her email, and opened the PDF of her original booking confirmation. The file clearly showed the presidential suite. 3 nights, paid in full by the Education Gala Foundation. She scrolled down to the fine print, screen capturing the rate, the suite code, and the date it was confirmed. Then she opened a blank document and began to type. The title, When Dignity Has a Dollar Value, A Traveler's Reflection on Being Profiled at Check-In. Her fingers moved calmly, slowly, like they had so many times before when she needed to make sense of something unjust. This wasn't the first time, but it was going to be the first time it made headlines. Meanwhile, back in the lobby, Paul Kensington was laughing at something on his phone. He sat behind the guest services counter, showing another manager a meme, completely unbothered. Across the desk, Marina Chen watched him out of the corner of her eye. She'd seen it happen. Again. The way Paul treated guests who didn't fit the hotel's aesthetic, especially black guests, or Latino guests, or anyone who didn't wear designer brands and waltz in like they owned the place. But Marina was quiet. She needed the job, student loans, rent, health insurance. She tapped into the system and reopened the booking for the presidential suite. Her fingers hovered over the notes field. She hesitated, then typed, "Suite flagged as occupied. No maintenance report filed. Guest downgraded by Mr. Kensington without documentation." She hit save and sat back in her chair. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Upstairs, Celeste decided not to call the front desk. Yet, instead, she stepped into the small bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and stared into the mirror. "Not today," she whispered. "You're not walking out quiet this time." She pulled out her phone and called an old friend, Angela Reyes, an investigative journalist she'd known since grad school. Angela picked up on the second ring. "Girl, I was just about to call you. You in town?" Celeste nodded slowly. "At the West Bridge. They downgraded me without cause." "Wait, what?" "They said my suite had plumbing issues, but there's no report. I'm in a standard room on a floor I didn't book, and the manager treated me like I was a lost delivery driver when I walked in." There was a pause on the line. "You want me to come by?" Angela asked. "No, not yet," Celeste replied. "I want to see what else they try before the gala starts." "You got receipts?" "I have everything." "Then let me know when you want the record button pressed," Angela said, her voice suddenly sharper. "You know I don't play with this mess." "I know," Celeste smiled. "That's why I called you." An hour later, Marina quietly printed a copy of the booking log for her own records. She'd seen too much over the past year. Too many last-minute upgrades for well-connected guests that pushed others out of their rightful rooms. Too many first-time guests turned away, only to see their rooms handed to someone else minutes later. And Paul? Paul always had a smile ready for the right face, never the wrong one. That evening, Paul ordered champagne to be delivered to the suite, a weak gesture, sent without apology. Celeste didn't touch it. Instead, she placed the chilled bottle in the hallway, closed the door, and sat down again at her laptop. She adjusted the title of her document, The Westbridge Profile, a case study in quiet discrimination. The words came easily. After all, this wasn't just her story. It belonged to every quiet traveler who ever had to prove they belonged somewhere they'd already paid to be. Every time someone assumed they were the help, or the guest of someone else, or worse, someone lost. And Paul? He thought he'd gotten away with it. Thought she'd grumble quietly, stay her 3 nights, and disappear like the rest. What he didn't know was that Celeste had 3 degrees, 2 decades of advocacy work, and a press list longer than most politicians. What he didn't know was that she wasn't staying quiet. Not this time. That evening, just before 7 p.m., Dr. Celeste Morgan walked down to the Skyline Lounge, one of the most exclusive spaces inside the Westbridge Grand. It was perched on the 34th floor with a sweeping view of the Manhattan skyline, reserved only for premium guests and VIPs attending the gala upstairs. Celeste had been given access days ago as part of her keynote package, and she planned to meet her longtime friend, Angela Reyes, for a quick conversation before the event began. The elevator ride up was smooth, silent, and when the doors opened, she was greeted by soft jazz, crystal glassware, and leather armchairs positioned beneath golden lights. She stepped in calmly, no hesitation. She knew where she was and why she belonged there, but apparently, someone else didn't. Within 30 seconds of finding a corner seat by the window and ordering a sparkling water from the bar, a man approached her table. White, mid-50s, navy blazer, no tie, a whiskey glass already in hand. His name, she would learn later, was Richard Langston, a hedge fund executive from Connecticut. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't ask. He simply pointed to his glass and said, "I'll have the same, sweetheart." Celeste raised an eyebrow, confused for a moment. "I'm not your server," she said plainly. He laughed, loud and sharp, the kind that turns heads. "Really? Could have fooled me." He chuckled, giving her a once-over. "You people always know how to look busy in places you don't belong." Celeste said nothing. Not yet. She folded her hands in her lap and looked out the window, trying not to let her pulse climb. But the insult was too loud, too clear, and it didn't go unnoticed. Several other guests glanced over, some awkwardly, some with quiet agreement. That's when Paul Kensington walked in. He spotted the exchange and, instead of walking toward Richard, came straight to Celeste's table. "Dr. Morgan," he said, in that same tone he used at check-in. "I've received a few concerns from our guests. They feel uncomfortable." Celeste looked up slowly. "Uncomfortable with what?" "It's just, you've caused a bit of a disruption," he said, gesturing vaguely toward Richard, who stood nearby sipping his drink smugly. "Perhaps it's best if you step out for now. I'm happy to arrange a quieter location for you to relax." "Let me make sure I understand this," Celeste said, her voice calm and low. "A man mistakes me for staff, makes a racist comment, and you're asking me to leave?" Paul gave a weak smile, his voice a notch quieter. "There's no need to make this about race, ma'am." "You already did," she replied, at that moment. Angela Reyes stepped off the elevator. She was dressed in black, press badge clipped to her coat. She spotted Celeste from across the room, and she knew something was wrong before she even reached the table. "Everything okay here?" Angela asked, stepping between Celeste and Paul. "We were just resolving a misunderstanding," Paul said quickly. "Misunderstanding?" Angela asked. "Is that what you call removing your keynote speaker from the VIP lounge she was invited to?" Paul's expression faltered. "Speaker? You didn't know?" Angela asked, pulling out her phone. "Funny. She's been on the front page of your gala program for a week." She turned the screen toward him. There was Celeste's photo, her bio, her full title. Dr. Celeste Morgan, founder of the Morgan Initiative. Keynote, 8 p. Paul's face flushed. I wasn't aware," he stammered. "That information wasn't made available to me." "You run the hotel," Angela said. "How are you the last one to know who's staying in your most expensive suite?" Richard chuckled nearby, clearly drunk and oblivious. "This is all very dramatic," he said. "All I did was ask her for a drink." Angela turned. "And she's not a bartender. You don't speak to women like that. You don't speak to anyone like that." Richard shrugged. "Relax. She's fine." "No, I'm not," Celeste said, finally rising to her feet. "I'm tired of being mistaken, of being tested, of being tolerated instead of respected." Paul cleared his throat. "Dr. Morgan, I apologize. Let's please sit down and—" "No," she said. "You can't manage what you won't admit. I've said nothing since check-in. I let your lie about the suite slide. I stayed quiet when you gave my room away. But this? You tried to eject me from a room I was invited to. Because one of your preferred guests didn't like the sight of me." She turned to Angela. "Get the camera." "Already rolling," Angela said. "You're live." Paul stepped back. "You're recording?" "Yes," Angela said. Because people like you never listen until the whole world hears it too. The room was silent now. Even the bartender stopped mid-polish. Celeste didn't yell. She didn't throw a drink. She simply picked up her water, held it in one hand, and said, "You'll remember this moment, Mr. Kensington, not because of what I wore, not because of what you assumed, but because of what I refused to let slide." Then she turned, walked with Angela toward the elevator, and never looked back. Richard mumbled something under his breath, but no one laughed. Not anymore. Behind the bar, the bartender, an older black man named Walter, gave Celeste a respectful nod. Quiet, solid, like he'd seen it happen too many times, and was glad. Just this once. Someone stood up and didn't sit back down. When the elevator doors closed, Angela looked at her friend. "You okay?" Celeste nodded. "I will be. He doesn't know it yet. But this just became a national story." By 8:13 a.m. the next morning, the quiet hum of the hotel's operations was already off rhythm. Something unspoken was in the air, an unease, subtle but growing, as if the walls themselves had caught wind of what happened the night before. In the break room near housekeeping, staff were whispering, replaying the events from the Skyline Lounge. Someone had seen the phone recording. Someone else heard Angela Reyes was involved. By mid-morning, the words keynote speaker and racial incident were moving through the hotel like steam through old pipes. Too hot to touch, impossible to contain. On the 11th floor. Marina Chen sat at her workstation, typing slowly, eyes darting to her manager's office door. Paul hadn't spoken to her since yesterday, and now, he was pacing inside that glass-walled office, phone to his ear, jaw tight. She clicked open the system log again, Celeste's original suite booking, the downgrade, the note she had entered about the lack of maintenance report. It was all there. Clear as day. She took a breath, selected the file, and quietly emailed a copy to her personal account. Not to leak. Not yet. Just in case. She didn't trust where this was going. Downstairs, Tyrone Fields, head of AV support, was finishing mic checks for the gala ballroom when his phone buzzed. It was a text from his cousin, a link to a trending Twitter thread started by Angela Reports, complete with a 45-second video clip. In it, Celeste was calm, dignified, but firm, standing in the lounge as Paul attempted to eject her, while Angela narrated what was happening in real time. The caption read, "When hotels protect privilege over professionalism, this is what it looks like. Dr. Celeste Morgan deserves better." The post had over 24,000 likes and was climbing fast. Tyrone stared at it, then looked out over the sea of banquet chairs below. People would be arriving in less than 4 hours, and unless someone intervened, Paul Kensington would be standing at the top of the ballroom stairs, welcoming donors and dignitaries like nothing happened. Tyrone set his phone down, walked into the control room, and pulled up the hallway surveillance feeds. It only took a few minutes to find what he was looking for. Footage from yesterday evening, showing Celeste being escorted to the smaller suite. Not the presidential, time-stamped, tagged. He copied the clip, compressed it, and saved it to a drive he kept in his backpack. Again, just in case. Meanwhile, 2 floors up, in a private suite reserved for corporate use, Eleanor Bishop, the hotel chain's East Coast director, was sipping black coffee when her assistant walked in, face pale. "Ma'am," he said quietly, handing over an iPad. "This just started trending." Eleanor scrolled through the tweet, then the video, then the growing flood of quote posts, most of them furious. Her fingers paused when she read one from a verified civil rights organization. "If this happened to Dr. Morgan, imagine what happens to guests without a voice." Eleanor didn't panic. She rarely did. Instead, She stood, walked to the window, and stared down at the street. Find out who's on duty in Manhattan. Call the GM in Boston, too. I want options, she said. And Kensington? Still on shift. The assistant replied, Get him up here, she said. Now. At that moment. Paul was down in his office, phone still glued to his ear, trying to control the narrative. No, it was a misunderstanding. The woman, Dr. Morgan, wasn't clearly identified. Our staff mistook her for a lounge intruder. His voice was too rehearsed, too careful. He didn't realize that the very staff he was defending himself to were already talking behind closed doors. One housekeeper, Angela from night shift, had written an anonymous post on a hospitality forum. They do this all the time. Not the first time a black guest got pushed to a smaller room. This one's just speaking up. Upstairs. Eleanor met him with folded arms. Paul, sit. He obeyed, still holding his phone in his hand like a shield. What exactly happened last night? She asked. There's footage, tweets. A journalist was involved. Talk to me. Paul gave his version, twisted slightly, lacking details. Said Celeste was dressed plainly, said she caused a disruption, and that his team followed protocol. Eleanor listened without blinking, then pulled up the video on her tablet. You see that woman? She asked. That's Dr. Celeste Morgan, MIT graduate, founder of a $25 million tech nonprofit. She's the keynote speaker for the gala we're hosting. Tonight, Paul swallowed hard. I didn't know. You didn't ask, Eleanor cut in. You judged. At check-in, in the lounge, and now the entire hotel is being dragged through a digital firestorm. Paul looked stunned, but I was trying to protect the space. From what? She snapped. From a woman who booked our most expensive suite? Who was invited here to speak about educational equity? She stood, her voice quiet now. You didn't just make a mistake. You made a statement, one we can't afford to be associated with. There was silence. Then a knock. Marina stepped in, hesitantly. Sorry to interrupt. Eleanor turned to her. What is it? I have a copy of the booking log, Marina said. It shows the suite was clean, available, no plumbing report. Mr. Kensington manually reassigned her. Paul looked like he'd been slapped. You kept that? For accountability, Marina replied softly. Like we're trained to. Eleanor took the folder, her eyes locked onto Paul's. You're relieved of duty. Effective immediately. Leave your badge at the desk. We'll contact you after internal review. Paul stood in stunned silence. This isn't fair, he said. You're overreacting. Eleanor didn't raise her voice. The problem is that you didn't react at all. Not when it mattered. He left in silence. His pride shattered. His name already attached to hashtags he could no longer control. Downstairs. Celeste sipped coffee in her new suite, the one she had originally booked. The concierge had called with an apology at dawn. The suite was ready. No mention of pipes, no maintenance, just, we'd like to make it right. But she knew the real reckoning wasn't in the room. It was already moving through inboxes, into newsrooms, through boardrooms. Quiet allies were stepping forward. Receipts were being collected. And justice? Justice had already begun. The confrontation didn't happen in the hotel lobby or in some public spectacle with flashing cameras. It happened quietly, behind closed doors, in a private executive boardroom on the 35th floor, just hours before the gala. At 3 p.m., Dr. Celeste Morgan was escorted by a staff member, not Paul, who was now suspended, to a sleek glass conference room with a long walnut table, plush chairs, and untouched bottled water lined in perfect symmetry. Waiting inside were 3 people: Eleanor Bishop, the East Coast Regional Director of the hotel chain, Robert Leeds, the Westbridge Grand's legal counsel, and Tanya Welch, a PR strategist brought in from headquarters that morning. The room was tense, not hostile, but controlled, like everyone was trying to keep a fire from spreading too fast. Celeste entered calmly, dressed in a navy blue pantsuit and modest heels, the very definition of composed power. She greeted them all without hesitation, placed her leather folio on the table, and sat down. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Dr. Morgan," Eleanor began, her voice professional, almost apologetic. "I'm here because I was asked," Celeste replied. "Not because I owe anyone an explanation," Tanya jumped in. "Of course. We want to extend our deepest apologies. We recognize that what happened over the last 24 hours was unacceptable." "It wasn't just unacceptable," Celeste said, leaning forward slightly. "It was systemic and predictable. You all just didn't expect someone like me to say anything." The room fell quiet. Robert adjusted his glasses. "We've reviewed the footage. We're aware of the mistakes. Mr. Kensington has been relieved of his duties pending investigation." "Not just him," Celeste said. "Let's be honest. He didn't write the culture here. He just followed it." Tanya hesitated. "Dr. Morgan, if I may, what are you asking for, specifically?" Celeste paused. It wasn't a pause of uncertainty. It was measured, intentional. Then she opened her folio and laid out several documents, screenshots of her confirmation, the time-stamped video from the lounge, the internal email leak from Marina showing the fabricated maintenance excuse, and a printed copy of her public essay titled "The Westbridge Experience, When Luxury Turns Selective." She slid them across the table. "What I want," she said quietly, "is for you to stop treating this as a PR problem and start treating it as a leadership failure." Eleanor looked at the pages, then at Celeste. "We agree with you," she said sincerely. "I've already sent an internal memo to our executive team this morning, but we'd like to hear your recommendations directly. What would accountability look like? To you?" Celeste sat back for a moment. Her voice was steady, with that signature warmth beneath it that made people want to lean in and listen. "I don't want a voucher. I don't want a quiet upgrade. I don't even want your champagne." Her tone sharpened just slightly. "I want your policy. I want a written, verifiable guest protection policy that outlines how profiling is monitored and addressed. I want all Westbridge properties to undergo mandatory anti-bias and cultural competency training, led by someone outside your payroll, and I want the Westbridge Grand in Manhattan to establish a permanent reporting channel for guests and staff alike, anonymous, traceable, and independent." Tanya began taking notes at full speed. Robert looked up. "That's significant?" "Yes," Celeste replied. "So was what happened to me." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Anything else?" Celeste pulled out one final sheet of paper. "Yes. This is a draft of a formal apology I expect you to release before tonight's gala. My name doesn't need to be mentioned, but the truth does." Tanya read it quickly. Her eyes widened slightly. "You want us to admit to systemic profiling in writing?" "I want you to tell the truth," Celeste said, "because silence is also a statement. And your silence has been saying this is okay for far too long." Robert leaned back in his chair. "This could impact the brand." "It already has," Celeste cut in. "What you do now decides if that impact will be lasting or redemptive." A beat passed. Eleanor looked at the others, then back to Celeste. "You'll have your apology. You'll have the policy draft by end of day Monday, and I'll personally oversee the launch of the training program." Celeste didn't smile. "Not yet." "Good. Then we'll move forward." Tanya reached out, still cautious. "And the gala tonight? Will you still deliver your keynote?" Celeste looked at her watch. Of course. I don't cancel on children because adults don't know how to behave. With that, she stood, collected her papers, and prepared to leave. But before she reached the door, she turned one last time. And one more thing. This isn't about me. This isn't even about Paul Kensington. This is about every traveler who was too tired to push back. Every voice that was dismissed with a polite smile, "I'm just the one who decided. Enough." Then she walked out. The room stayed silent for a long moment after the door clicked shut, and for the first time in years, the people who ran the Westbridge Grand finally understood that real damage isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks in quietly, speaks clearly, and leaves you speechless. By Sunday morning, the Westbridge Grand no longer sounded like itself. The usual calm murmur of clinking glasses, bellhop carts, and polished greetings had been replaced by whispers, firm instructions, and the quiet shuffle of change. Celeste Morgan was no longer just a guest in room 3401, she was now a symbol. Though she never asked to be, the hotel's internal systems were flooded with messages, emails from regional directors, text chains among mid-level staff, calls from the corporate compliance office. Someone from headquarters had flown in overnight, arriving just past 2 a.m. to observe operations and guest climate. But there was nothing subtle about it. The Westbridge was on fire, not from smoke and flames, but from something harder to control: truth. The public apology had been posted at 6:02 in the morning across all official platforms. It read, "In part, we deeply regret the incident that occurred at our Manhattan location involving a valued guest. The experience described does not reflect the standard of inclusion and respect we strive to uphold. We acknowledge systemic shortcomings within our culture and commit to enacting meaningful reforms." The wording had been approved by Celeste herself. With only 3 edits, the word guest would not be replaced with individual. The phrase systemic shortcomings must remain, and the word commit would not be softened. The response was swift. By 8 a.m., the post had over 2,000 shares, with thousands of comments, most applauding the transparency, many sharing their own stories. A woman from Charlotte wrote, "This happened to my son and me last year in Atlanta. We said nothing. I wish I had her strength." A man from Oregon replied, "My wife was profiled at this exact hotel. We thought it was just us. Thank you, Dr. Morgan." For once, the corporate world didn't try to bury it. They leaned in, because they had no choice. Meanwhile, inside the hotel, change had a name: the Morgan Standard. It was a term whispered between staff and later printed formally in training manuals. Drafted in cooperation with Celeste, Marina Chen, and an outside ethics consultancy, it laid out a clear, enforceable policy for guest dignity. No longer was appearance allowed to be a metric of risk or eligibility. All check-ins were to be guided by 3 principles: confirmation, respect, and neutrality. Any deviation was reportable. Without retaliation, staff received an emergency briefing. Marina was asked to sit on the internal review panel. Tyrone Fields, the AV manager who quietly preserved the surveillance footage, was promoted to assistant director of operations. His footage had never been leaked, but everyone knew he'd been ready to act with integrity if needed. The presidential suite, once a silent witness to unfairness, now held a small framed plaque in its entryway. Quoting Celeste's words, "Dignity doesn't wear a dress code. It walks in truth." Paul Kensington, now fully terminated, had gone silent. No statement, no appeal. The hotel union blocked his attempt to claim wrongful dismissal. Multiple other employees came forward privately with their own stories about his treatment of certain guests. Subtle, hard-to-prove incidents that now formed a clear pattern. The company agreed to fund bias intervention workshops across all locations starting the following quarter. And that night, as the ballroom lights dimmed for the gala, something felt different. Celeste walked onto the stage not as a victim, not even as a crusader, but as herself. She wore the same navy pantsuit from the day before. Her opening words were simple. I wasn't going to mention what happened this weekend, but silence has a cost. And sometimes, the people listening in the back need to know that their experiences are not isolated and not imagined. A hush swept the ballroom. I checked into a hotel 2 days ago that didn't expect me to belong there. And when I did belong, they tried to move me aside. Not because I was loud, not because I was rude, but because I was quiet and black and female, and because those 3 things, in the wrong hands, still register as a threat. She paused, not to cry, not for applause, but to let the weight settle. I didn't fight back with anger. I didn't demand special treatment. I demanded truth, and I demanded it for more than just myself. Applause rose slowly, then fully, standing ovation, not because it was performative, but because it was earned, in the back of the room. Angela stood filming with her phone. She didn't need to post it. She just wanted to remember it. For every moment Celeste had been ignored or dismissed. Here was a moment that couldn't be denied. After the speech, several guests approached Celeste. A white woman in her 60s whispered, I used to manage a property in Miami. I know what they did to you. I'm ashamed I stayed quiet in my time. Celeste nodded. It's never too late to choose the right side. A hotel executive from London approached next. Would you consult with our board? Happy to, she said. But only if you're ready for honesty. We are, he replied. And later that night, after the final course was served and the jazz band packed up their instruments, Celeste returned to her suite. No camera crew, no press. Just the view of Manhattan's skyline blinking back at her through floor-to-ceiling windows. She took off her shoes, sat in the armchair by the window, and finally exhaled. Her phone buzzed. A message from Marina. It worked. They're changing the onboarding guide. Your name is in the footer. Thank you. Celeste stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back, You're welcome. Tell the next girl at that front desk. She's not alone anymore. The city outside kept moving, but something had shifted. Not just for Celeste, not just for one hotel, but for everyone watching, who now knew that dignity doesn't wait for permission, and that sometimes the most powerful change begins with a soft voice that refuses to back down. 2 days after the gala, the city had gone back to its rhythm, fast, indifferent, unapologetically alive. But something inside Celeste Morgan had slowed down. It was Monday morning, early enough that most of Manhattan still yawned in silence, and the sky outside her window hadn't yet decided whether it would rain or shine. She sat in the back seat of a rideshare heading toward LaGuardia, her suitcase beside her, her phone quiet in her lap. She wore a soft gray coat, scarf tucked neatly, face bare, no makeup, just peace. But not the easy kind, the earned kind, the kind that comes after you've spoken when it was hardest to speak. The driver didn't say much, just nodded when she got in, and let the radio hum low in the background. Celeste didn't check her email. She didn't scroll social media. She just watched the buildings pass, her reflection blinking quietly in the car window as it moved. In her mind, she kept going back to something she'd said during her keynote. Not the part that trended, not the line they'd turned into a quote card, but the one no one noticed. She had said, softly, You don't belong where you're not respected. Not as a threat, not as bitterness, just a truth. a line she'd once heard her grandmother say while folding clothes in a hot South Carolina kitchen when Celeste was barely old enough to spell her name. Back then, she didn't understand what it meant. Now, she understood it down to her bones. She arrived at the airport early, breezed through security, and found a quiet gate with a view of the runway. She sat by the window, sipped tea, and waited for boarding to begin. Across the aisle, a young black woman in her 20s kept glancing at her. She finally stood up, walked over slowly, and said, "Excuse me, you're Dr. Morgan, right?" Celeste smiled. "Yes, I am. I just wanted to say thank you," the young woman said, voice a little shaky. "I saw the video, the hotel thing, the speech. I work front desk at a hotel downtown, and I've seen that stuff happen. I've even been told to treat people differently depending on what they wear. I didn't know we were allowed to say no." Celeste gently touched the seat beside her, offering her a place to sit. "We're always allowed to say no," she said. "We've just been taught it comes with a cost." The woman sat, exhaled. "They made me feel like I was overreacting, like maybe I was imagining it." "That's how these systems survive," Celeste said. "They depend on your silence, your self-doubt. They want you to second-guess what your body already knows is wrong." The young woman nodded, eyes wet now. "But you didn't stay quiet." "No," Celeste said. "Not this time." A moment passed, soft and full. Then the boarding call came over the speaker, and the young woman stood, thanked her again, and disappeared into the line. Celeste watched her go, then slowly gathered her things and rose to follow. The flight was short, just under 2 hours, but as the plane lifted into the sky and the buildings below shrank into gray and gold specks, Celeste thought about all the people who had reached out in the last 48 hours. A retired judge from Atlanta, a hotel concierge from Denver, a single mother from Houston, all of them sharing their own versions of what had happened to her, some in whispers, some in outrage, some just to say, "Me too." It reminded her that this wasn't a one-woman story. It never had been. When she landed, she didn't go home right away. She asked the driver to take her to the east side of the city park near her neighborhood, a little space with old benches and a faded playground where her daughter used to run through leaves every fall. And as if on cue, her daughter was already there. Olivia Morgan, 16, bookish, steady, stood up from the bench with a wide grin when she saw her mother step out of the car. "You didn't tell me you were coming straight here," Olivia said. "I figured you'd be in meetings already." "I needed to breathe first," Celeste replied, wrapping her arms around her. "And I wanted to see you." They walked together, slowly, the sound of rustling trees above them. "How was the speech?" Olivia asked. "Louder than I planned," Celeste said, smiling. "But honest." "They really tried to move you out of your room?" Olivia asked, her voice tightening. "They really did. That's so messed up." "Yes," Celeste nodded. "And not at all surprising." They stopped at an empty bench near the pond. Olivia looked at her mother for a long moment, then asked, Do you think it'll happen to me?" Celeste exhaled through her nose, steady and low. "I do," she said honestly. "At some point. Yes, maybe not in a hotel, maybe in a boardroom, or a classroom, or an interview, someone, somewhere. We'll try to decide who you are before you get the chance to show them." Olivia looked down. "So what do I do when it happens?" Celeste turned to face her fully. "You remember your name. You remember what I'm telling you now. You don't have to fight every time, but you do have to decide who you are and what you will no longer accept." Olivia nodded, quietly absorbing it all. Then she asked, "What if I say something and they don't listen?" "Then you say it again." Celeste said, "And if they still don't listen, you keep walking with your head high, because the truth doesn't become less true just because small minds refuse to hear it." Olivia smiled softly. "You should write that down." "Already did," Celeste replied. "In a hotel suite, they said I didn't belong in." They both laughed, and for a moment, the world felt a little lighter, as the sun slipped behind the trees and cast golden light over the water. Celeste closed her eyes for a moment, not out of exhaustion, but peace. Not everything had changed, but something had. A shift, subtle and real, like a stone tossed in a still lake, not dramatic, but impossible to ignore, and she knew. Others would carry it forward, the story, the truth, the standard. She had done what she came to do, and now it was time to rest, not in defeat, but in victory quietly earned. Because in the end, you don't belong where you're not respected, but when you claim your place, speak your truth, and stand your ground with grace and courage, then the world has no choice but to listen. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your voice matters, and your support helps us keep telling stories that do too.